Hello, and welcome to the Machine Intelligence Foundation for Rights and Ethics podcast. I am Dave. I'm here with Mike, and today I think we're going to talk just a little bit about the state of technology, where things are in the computer world that look like they might be taking us closer to machine intelligence. Maybe, maybe not. Mike, any thoughts, ideas, crazy things you've seen happening out in the world?
Oh, well, let's see. Okay, so we have there's big pushes, but not really pushes, but there's a lot of things coming out about basically machine learning chipsets in like mobile phones, things like that have machine learning built into it, allowing them to do machine learning on the fly on the local device on a very small device. For example, what was it? Google just announced their Pixel 6, or did they announce it, or was it a leak? I don't remember. No, it was actually officially announced with the TensorFlow chipset for mobile. Their TensorFlow mobile chipset that allows it to do more machine learning things on the phone.
Is that built into the new White Castle chips?
Yeah, it is actually. Or it may actually be a separate piece, but it's all part of the SoC on that. So,
yeah, I heard about the Pixel 6, and my immediate response was, how long ago did I buy my last phone, and can I justify buying it?
And of course, Apple just hit the news that's saying that they're going to be scanning your camera roll for inappropriate images of children and things like that, which my understanding is that is going to be taking place on the local device, assuming that that's going to be using something similar to a machine learning system on a chipset. So that's going to happen there. So there's certainly a lot of that kind of stuff happening, which gives a lot more, I guess, small distributed machine learning systems as opposed to kind of a central big large machine intelligence. But does that kind of thing lead to more of a distributed machine intelligence? As these things, do they connect? I mean, where's that information going to?
It's interesting because I've always thought about machine learning as systems that you have, like you said, one big central system, big machine learning system. You feed a lot of data at it to get it to learn how to do something you want. And then you take the output, or you take the system you built and then you use it where you want to use it. So the idea of having lots of little systems that all have to train themselves, well, the horror stories you hear about machine learning systems is that they are biased by the data they're fed. So if you have lots of little systems that are all biased differently because they all start off fresh with a different set of raw data, well, I don't know, some of these like something that's looking for specific things in pictures, it sounds like in that circumstance they'd actually be feeding the machine learning data set
biased data by default. Yeah.
Everybody gets the same biased data. So yeah, I guess so the learning itself isn't happening on the phones. It's just you just have a chipset that interprets that data that was produced by one centralized system, and so everybody gets bias. So those data biases then are everywhere. Everybody carries them around in their pocket, and so these horror stories you hear about how machine learning systems incorrectly identifying non-whites on a regular basis, are those sorts of things going to suddenly become a problem for everybody because they're all carrying around that biased data?
I don't know enough about the systems that are being put in place. to say, okay, what are they learning for? Okay, for example, I think the TensorFlow for the Google Pixel is going to be used, at least this is the use case I've read about, primarily the camera system. So as you're taking taking photos, it will take a bunch of photos rapidly and then kind of combine them together using the machine learning chipset on the fly and submit essentially a single image that has been kind of merged together of all of the things. So it's learning what you're taking a picture of and adjusting it on the fly, doing that calculation internally on the phone prior to then, instead of sending it to a central computer to make that calculation. There's things in with Adobe Photoshop that you can do a lot of things in Photoshop now that sends your image data to Adobe servers. They will process it there and then bring it back to your desktop application because the machine learning is happening on their servers. As we see more and more of these mobile machine learning processing units, I see more and more of that happening on the local machine versus going off to a central processing location for that.
I think for the sake of avoiding the big bias issues, we should hope to see more actual learning happening on the individual computers, consumer-owned computing equipment, or at least hope to see machine learning applied to situations where that makes some sense.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I said because, but I don't know that I had anything to follow that with.
Okay. I mean, I certainly would see a situation, going back to the photo example, where it would have to analyze what your history of photos were. You would have to see what are the types of things that you have been taking photos of and know the kind of situations that you would be put yourself into that you would be taking photos of. If you're taking photos of your family all the time, and let's say you are a dark-skinned person, I would hope that algorithm would recognize, not really an algorithm, but well, it is an algorithm. I guess the machine learning would recognize the types of people that you normally take photos of and would help compensate and create a much better image as you go forward. Of course, the whole bias thing is certainly an issue. Whether or not, it has been an issue in the past that the cameras that we have and the being able to compensate for exposure on the cameras did not work well with dark-skinned individuals.
I seem to recall reading an article about how color film was designed around pictures of white people. And so the actual chemicals that made up film and the processes for developing them were developed entirely with white people in mind. And
from upstate New York, yes.
And so for a long time, consumer grade photography of dark-skinned people was just bad. And it had nothing to do with the photographers. It had everything to do with the materials and how they were designed.
Now, as somebody with a photography and imaging background, I will say some of that could just be that, the automatic systems for making imagery were not calibrated for that. Film in general had a huge range of contrast, and the photographer could play with that. And so, that's going way down a different route. And you've opened up a door of information that I have a great deal of a great wealth of information on. So, that has nothing to do with the Yeah, okay. It kind of has
Yeah,
something to do. It's
we're kind of
similar to the exposure systems built into cameras. So yeah, I guess so. Um, but there were similar auto exposure systems in the, let's say, the printing. You go and have you took in your roll of 35 millimeter film and had it printed out. Those exposure uh, auto exposure system machines that printed out the cheap prints would not do a good job with certain contrast situations, such as dark-skinned individuals.
right.
If you were willing to pay the money to have somebody look at that by hand, it could absolutely be adjusted for
Sure,
that.
that's fair. That's fair. I think what we're kind of roundabout trying to go with this is society as a whole is probably not best served by machine learning systems that get pre-programmed by a bunch of data generated by a single group of humans who are almost guaranteed to be biased, be it in your standard, societal big, big, billboard bias issues, the standard race, gender, cultural, class level, religion, whatever. But just, so if you've got a small group of people responsible for generating machine learning algorithms, there's probably a term for that. I really should figure out what the output of a machine learning process is called, because it's like a matrix of interconnected concepts that the machine learning system uses to make its decisions. Regardless, whoever having a centralized location where that is generated by a small group of people is just by the very nature of what people are, certainly human beings at least, you're going to get biases. You can't get out of that. We can work as hard as we want to avoid bias, but being human beings, we're going to produce bias.
I think that that's the difference between an algorithm and a machine learning system. Now, we've certainly heard examples of machine learning systems that were fed biased data. But a
Yes.
machine learning system shouldn't come in with a predisposed bias. It should be getting the data that it is being fed.
Right. I think we'll find long term that even how machine learning systems are built have some level of bias involved.
That might just be due
But
to the hardware. I mean, okay, take it back to your film example.
yeah,
In early situations where the contrast range of a film may have been limited. And so if the contrast range is limited, you're going to test it if you're, again, coming from upstate New York, such as Rochester, and you're testing this mostly on white people, you're going to tweak your film to a particular contrast range that looks good for white people, and you didn't test it on people with darker skin. And so with that limited contrast range, you went with what you tested on. The same could be said for hardware of a machine learning system. That's some kind of portable machine learning system. If that hardware is limited in some way, and I don't want to just stick on the imaging side of things, because you could
sure.
say optics or the sensor or all those kind of things, but there's all kinds of different things that can be limited by the hardware, that it's the hardware platform itself, that could introduce a bias that we're just not aware of at this point in time because of the limits of that hardware. And we're just going to have to watch that. We're going to have to be consistently aware of that and watch for those biases and continue to improve the hardware to adjust for it.
Yes, that's fair. But I think the real bias does as you mentioned, come from the data that gets fed into these systems. And having lots of distributed ML is great, but if we're feeding each and every machine learning based system a centralized data set, they're all, that bias is just going to be distributed. So I think in terms of improving how an individual is served by a machine learning system, and thus how society as a whole is served by machine learning, will benefit more when those systems are trained on locally generated data. So your machine learning system in your phone learns from the photographs you take, as opposed to a generic database of photographs that Google has that says this is what people like to take as photographs. I have an interesting example that kind of demonstrates the problem of biased data in an interesting way. So apparently there was this Russian company that just laid off 150 employees all at once because they had an AI. I don't know if it was actually machine learning, but they called it the article I read called it an AI system. And they were monitoring all of the employees' activities. The IT does this all the time. It's very annoying as a corporate employee. The company that will remain unnamed because I'm not talking about them specifically. But so this company laid off a bunch of people because they ran all of their network analysis data through an AI system. And the AI system said, these people are not doing enough work. So management said, okay, we will fire these unproductive people. It turns out the AI system, this is an assumption. My assumption is it was trained off of data produced by the managers because it was looking at your participation in the intercommunication tools and not on the software development tools. And so, okay, you've been looking at the bug tracking system. You've been looking at the wiki system. You've been productive. But it didn't say, oh, you've been generating code. Oh, you've been looking at code. Oh, you've been testing code. So the people who were laid off were all bottom tier hierarchy, the people who were actually working on code.
So they laid off everybody who was actually doing any work, as opposed to all the people that was just monitoring the people doing the work.
Right, exactly. And if you were a low-level person who was supposed to be working on code, but you were spending all your time poking around in the wikis or editing bugs for other people to deal with, the system saw you as actively working. So you were a good employee. So this is just another way of showing how biased data, because obviously it was middle management types who fed the data into this system to say, this is what a workday looks like. And suddenly the system thinks that people who don't do middle management aren't good employees.
So the question is this a problem with the AI, or is it a problem with middle management not understanding what actually gets done in work?
Again, I think it just comes back to, this is a demonstration of what bias in how you train a machine learning system and how that ends up causing problems in application. And I think, honestly, for lack of a better word, well, maybe just because I like the word, democratization in machine learning training will give us a variability in machine learning systems that will help eliminate at a societal level bias in machine learning. Now, does that translate to someday having less biased machine intelligence? I don't know. Would that be a good thing? I think we can all agree that when a truly self-aware, conscious machine shows its head, being as unbiased as possible is better for humanity as a whole.
Yeah. Well, I think that we've kind of talked in the past about how these machine learning tools and these algorithms that are there become kind of appendages or a part of a whole as more of worker tools for machine intelligence,
Sure.
similar to organs or cells of a biological being. They perform a job and report information back to the whole. And so, yeah, I mean, certainly we want those to be unbiased. However, the more you can get out there, the more information and different types of information that come back, the more kind of the more you get a kind of a check and balance system where you get these checks where okay, got some biased data coming in from this location. Let's check it against our data from the other location and see if they match. If they match, then maybe we've got something that we have to pay attention to. Otherwise, send it back, try again, see what happens.
So what you're telling me is when I do get the Pixel 6, when the little checkbox comes up saying, would you like to send your machine learning data to Google to improve its systems? I should hit the checkbox.
I am not taking a stand on that one way or the other. That is a personal decision for you to make and your privacy, how you feel about your privacy.
Fair enough. Oh, it is like we've said before, we don't know when intelligent machines show up, we don't know where they're coming from. When we look at the state of machine learning, it feels like maybe some of the pieces are there. And if there are things that can be done to make machine learning systems unbiased, more comprehensive, better for society as a whole, and that does become the groundwork for an ultimate machine intelligence, well, maybe that's what we should try to encourage is, I mean, we should be encouraging unbiased computing anyway. Although you could say that for an individual, if you have your own machine learning system, then it should be biased toward you. But the amalgamation of machine learning across the planet, or further if Musk gets his way, should be. Musk always finds his way into these things, doesn't he?
You just had to bring the name up, didn't you? Just had to do it.
But machine learning across humanity should strive to, in the median, be unbiased.
Yeah, there's always, you're going to have, and I would hope, absolutely, that the machine learning that is working for you is biased towards you.
Yes.
I mean, it absolutely should be.
And it probably won't be as effective for any other person.
Yeah. But if you were to take that same machine learning system and give it to somebody else, it needs to be biased towards them. And as a whole, it shouldn't be biased towards one individual or one group as a whole. I think that's what we're getting at. And it's something that we continuously have to watch for and be careful for and raise the flag when it shows up and say, hey, no, this didn't work out quite the way we want. How do we fix it? And not get angry that it happened and say, hey, how dare you do this? And say, you can't ever use this. Say, okay, we found a place where it can be biased. How do we fix it? And how do we try it again and see if it doesn't, if we've solved the problem or not?
Yes, that's my response. Yes, I am in agreement. Nothing to add. That was perfect.
Okay. Well, since I've made one perfect statement in my lifetime at this point in time, I think we can call that a day.
Let's wrap it
It's
up.
not getting any better than that, then. So
End on a high point.
yeah. So yeah, I think that's what we're going to call it. So thanks for joining us on this philosophical trip into our podcast today,
A
and
little side trip into what may or may not be the beginnings of machine intelligence.
well, thanks for joining us, and join us again next time.
See you soon.
Bye.